بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. So we finished the last section, which was about not helping the oppressed people. And now we move into the next section, which is the 31st chapter, which is talking about sorcery or magic. So, there's a lot of things dealing with this subject we'll go into, but, some people say, for example, oh, magic, I don't believe it. It's something made up or, you know, this type of thing. But it's mentioned in Quran. So when we see that it's mentioned in Quran, this is enough for us to show that it is a real subject. And for example, in Surah Falaq, we say, وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. We're seeking refuge from the people who blow in knots. So it was a type of magic that they would use. They would say some incantations, I guess, and tie the knot and blow on the knot. It was a type of sorcery and witchcraft. So it does exist. And to practice this type of sorcery or magic is one of the greater sins and is haram. So we'll see what the author says about the subject, inshallah. So he says, a tradition from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been recorded in Wasa'il Shia, which Prophet has mentioned that magic is a greater sin. And we have the tradition from Abdul Alim that has mentioned Imam Jawad alayhi salam, all the way back to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, that he said sorcery is a greater sin because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Holy Quran, in Surah Baqarah, ayat 102, and they followed what the Shayateen chanted of sorcery in the reign of Suleiman. And Suleiman was not a disbeliever, but the Shayateen disbelieved. They taught men sorcery, and that was sent down to the two angels at Babel, Harut and Marut. Yet these two taught no man until they had said, surely we were only a trial, therefore do not be a disbeliever. Even then, men learned from these two magic by which they might cause separation between man and his wife. They cannot hurt with it anyone except with Allah's permission, and they learned what harmed them and did not profit them. And certainly they know that he who brought it should have no share of good in the hereafter, and evil was the price for that which they sold their souls, but had they but known this. So it's mentioned in the Quran, which is enough proof to establish the fact that it does exist. We cannot say that it is something made up. I mean, in some of these things that we see is probably exaggerated. As it's not like how we see these things like Harry Potter, for example. And I remember I was talking with this might be strange. I thought it was strange. I was talking with a mujtahid in Najaf, and he was giving us all sort of examples and things like this. And he was saying that, that we need to look at the methods of successful people and how they convey their message. And like, for example, a famous author or a famous movie director or famous speaker, and see what methods they are using. And we can use those methods for Islam to attract people and, halal way, of course. Like, what style did they write their book in? How did they attract so many people to read their book? And he gave me an example of Harry Potter, which I was like, how does Sayed know about this Harry Potter? And he told me he actually read like 6 volumes or something of this book. So I was like, wow, I couldn't imagine, much of his here telling me he read Harry Potter book. But he was telling me, I was intrigued to see, like, why do so many people love this book? How did they write this book? How did they become so successful in this? And he told me that most of these things in this book they are taking from Islam. But they're making a story out of it and twisting it in their own way. For example, they are talking to animals in the book. So he said that, okay, Suleiman alayhi salam talked to animals. This is in Quran. So they're taking some things from Quran and they're twisting it in their way to make their story. But a lot of it is rooted here, and people like these things. But it's also mentioned in Quran. So I found that was very interesting. Anyhow, the author he says, according to Tafsir al-Mizan, this ayat that we mentioned, it shows that sorcery was prevalent among the Jews for a long time, from Bani Israel. And they used to ascribe it to Suleiman alayhi salam. And they believed that Suleiman had mastered the techniques of controlling the angels and the jinns and the animals through magic. And some of them, these methods had reached them. So they said that he did this through magic, how he had mastery over the jinn and the angels and the animals and these things. But really, this was tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he was able to do this. Everything is dependent on Allah, and he didn't do these independent through his own type of sorcery or magic, how they were thinking. He said they also implicated the two angels Harut and Marut for other magical rites. Therefore, the Quran has denounced their belief regarding Suleiman because sorcery is the method of misusing the power of human spirit in order to perform extraordinary acts. He said it's against the divine law because it negates the supremacy of Allah. Since Suleiman was a prophet, he was ma'soom, and he can't be blamed for violating the divine command or committing haram action. He says, therefore, to ascribe sorcery to Suleiman is wrong because Suleiman is ma'asum. We cannot ascribe sin to a ma'asum. And the Quran we mentioned, he says, and Suleiman was not a disbeliever, but the shayateen disbelieved. They taught men sorcery. So the action that was attributed to Suleiman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clears it up in Quran and says that no, it wasn't Suleiman, it was shayateen that did these things. Then he talks about the angels Harut and Marut. He said, we mentioned in the ayat already, he says, we should, however, know that some of the commentaries of the Holy Quran by Ahlul Sunnah have recorded some lewd traditions on this subject, and the lewdness itself proves their forged nature. For example, they say that the jinn stole the ring of Suleiman, and with the help of its power, they ruled for 40 days from his throne. And during this period, the shayateen spread the practice of sorcery among the masses. They have also written that Harut and Marut were two angels. When they became seized with sensuality, they drank wine, murdered a man, and later committed adultery with a woman. This riwayat is also mentioned in our traditions as well, and it is mentioned in our books from Tafsir Kummi. I remember reading this tradition, and we talked about it one time, a long time ago in class. But it was because it didn't have anything to do with the sorcery, but it said that there were two angels that were criticizing human beings on how they would sin and disobey their Lord so easily and things like this. So Allah gave them the instincts that man has and sent them to the earth. And as soon as they got there, they committed all type of haram things by first being tempted by a woman, then drinking wine, then committing adultery, and then being unlawful relationship with this woman. So we do have it in our books as well. But the author, Ayatollah Dastagir Shirazi, he rejects these narrations and says they come from Ahlul Sunnah. Um, he said this is a false allegation because during the conversation on this subject with Ma'mun, as mentioned in Uyun al-Akbar al-Rida from Sheikh al-Saduq, Imam Rida alayhi salam says that Harut and Marut were two angels that taught people the method of nullifying the magic of the sorcerers, so as able to prevent them, to prevent the effect of those magical traditions. They didn't teach any magic spell before warning them that there was a test from Allah and that they shouldn't fall victim to kufr. But some people became disbelievers by misusing the spells to cause discord between the husband and the wife, though the proper utility of the spell was obstructing the dark magic. So they misused these things. A lot of times we have something, but it could be used for a good thing, as these angels taught them methods to counteract this type of magic. But if you misuse those things, then it would become haram. For example, Allah has given us grapes. We can use them to make juice. We can eat them. We can do other things, halal things with them. But if we make wine out of them, the same thing that was halal can become haram. Depends on how we use it. If we use it for good, it's good. If we misuse it, then that's what's termed as something haram. So they misuse these things, and these other type of things become haram. There's many types of this magic today and prevalent, and it's still used in some parts of the world to put, bad things on people, to cause discord between husband and wife, or to cause loss in business or other type of things. And I don't know so much about those things because I don't delve into those things and not very, I just recite Surah Falaq and Surah Nas every day since I've been a teenager to, we have rawaya that say these are surahs to recite for protection. Or for example, Ayatul Kursi and these type of things. It's very good to be in the habit of reciting these things and being in the remembrance of Allah and asking Allah to protect us from these harmful things. I remember one time, all these acts of magic, from what I've heard, they are used from bad things. For example, one of my teachers told me that one of the ways that they can do this magic or interact with jinn and other things is that they disrespect the Quran. So one of those ways is they would sit on the Quran, na'udhu billah, and then they would do these practices. And one time, I was here. Someone told me a story. It was interesting. Here in Turkey, that the guy's business was very successful, and then there was some dispute about some property with his father passed, and his uncle said he owned this, and other things happened. So his uncle went and they did some dark magic on their business, and they end up they were very crowded at one time, but he said that. They killed some animal or something without saying the Bismillah. So the animal was haram to eat, and they killed one of these haram animals to eat anyway. They took the blood from this thing and did something and put it under all of the tables in the restaurant or something. And then after that, no one would come. And he was trying to find a way to break this type of thing. I don't know, if this is a true thing or not, but it's just an example, some of these things that people do. And maybe you've heard of some of these things also. So, anyhow, these things are still prevalent today. He said about, he says, even the Shia scholars differ in the explanation of this verse that we mentioned, Surah Baqarah, Ayat 102. Tafsir Majma al-Bayan has also recorded different views. He said some thinkers have thought that this is one of the divine secrets, and they further offer the tafsir that Harut and Marut signify the intellect and the soul of man. These two entities changed their abstract form and assumed the physical body. Therefore, they were examined in their material life. This is one thought of some people who do tafsir. They became engrossed in satisfying their carnal desires. Consequently, they attached themselves solely to the material world and continued to worship their desires. In this way, they committed an injustice on themselves, and they deprived themselves from barakat. They also made themselves liable for punishment. Such traditions are unacceptable according to their wordings, and if they are reported to have been uttered by the Ma'sumin, they should be understood in the light of their sayings only. So he doesn't consider these as authentic. He's just giving different opinions. Said the Honorable Sheikh Saduq says that Zahra and Suhail are two types of marine animals who are referred to in the traditions by the name of Harut and Marut. They are not two stars, as the Ahlul Sunnah believe. Moreover, Quran mentioned above and clear that magic is equivalent to kufr, and that the sorcerer will not receive any benefit on Yawm al-Qiyamah. The next ayah, it says, and if they had believed and guarded themselves against evil, the reward from Allah would certainly have been better had they but known this. So we see that the key is believing and guarding against evil. This is taqwa, which meant to guard oneself. So we have to strive to work on this continuously. It's not something one just has. We have to always work on this. It's not to that we say we believe and then we're free of desires and we're free of the threat of turning to disbelievers and turning into sinners, but we must always remain vigilant and on guard of our faith and our souls, uh, and keep our souls, safe against the constant threat of corruption. So it's jihad al-nafs, something we have to constantly do. Every day we wake up, we are fighting a battle against ourselves, against our lower desires. And through training, we can be stronger against these things. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa said, three kinds of people will not enter the Jannah. Habitual alcoholics, people who are drinking all the time, the sorcerers, and those who sever the relationships with their family. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam said, the magician will enter the hellfire like the disbeliever. This is a type of disbelief. He also says, if one learns magic, whether a little bit or more of it, he has become a kafir, and his end result is that he does not receive divine mercy. His punishment is that the punishment for this is the death penalty in Islam, except if he repents. Now, there needs to be, when we talk about these capital punishments, there needs to is a whole nother discussion in fiqh if these things can be implemented in ghaiba or not. The common view is that they cannot be, they need to be done by a ma'soom. Also, that there needs to be, all of the conditions need to be present for this to happen. And they also have to be stubborn in their act, like they don't want to repent and they want to do kufr, and they will continue in this. And there's many, many conditions, which is a whole nother topic in itself. So that is the punishment in the time of which would the Imam would issue or Rasulullah would issue if they met all of the conditions. And it's very hard to meet all of the conditions, which is a type of mercy for the person in order that he can make repentance and do tawbah and turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib says that a woman came to Rasulullah and said, my husband is very severe and he misbehaves with me. So I have prepared something for him that he may become kind to me. Some type of magical concoction. We can say that she wants to put some sort of spell on him. So Rasulullah said, the curse of Allah be on you. You have darkened the realms of the seas and the lands. The angels of the earth and the heavens, they are send curse on you because of this doing this type of magic. After going from there, the woman began to fast during the days and prayed during the night. And she trimmed her hair and started wearing some sort of leather garment, it says. And when Rasulullah learned of this, he remarked that her fasting and her prayers would not be accepted. So whatever type of magical practice she was doing, dark magic she was doing, when Rasulullah learned about this, he said her prayers and fasting are void, because she is not a believer when she is doing this thing. She is in a state of kufr. There's a hadith and comment that these actions will not save her from the hudud, basically. And sorcery is such a severe crime that her repentance and her worship won't bring her near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she has done injustice to her husband. Unless he forgives her, she cannot be forgiven, because he's done nas. When you have done a crime against another person, that person also needs to forgive you. When we backbite someone, for example, we need to get their forgiveness and also ask Allah for forgiveness. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if a person goes to a magician, a diviner, or one of those fortune tellers, and or a liar, and testifies to the truth of whatever he says, he has become a disbeliever according to all the books revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's haram for us to go to these people who say they can read your fortune, or they can talk to the jinn, or they can do magic and give you some sort of steps that you can attain your goal of whatever you're trying to do. For example, someone wants to get married to this person, but that person doesn't want to marry them, so they go and they do all of these type of magical rituals in order to get that person to marry them, as an example, or whatever other reason they're doing it for. If someone does this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa said they have become kafir, and their prayer and their fasting is not accepted in this case. So some people do these type of things as a joke. They go and they get their fortune told, and they read their palm, and they read their coffee cup, and they the leftover grounds of the coffee within the, like for example in the Turkish coffee, or these things. They do it as just a pastime or some, like a joke, but we shouldn't do these things. We have other riwayat probably mentioned in this chapter also that the person who does this, their salat is not accepted for 40 days. Same thing as like someone who drinks alcohol. So let's see the next section. We can go to it says the late Sayyid writes in one Wasila and Najat, that magic means the writing, this is the definition of magic, means the writing and reciting of some special spells and charms, and the burning of particular objects so that its smoke can be used for some extraordinary effects. Making a picture and blowing or tying in knots, like I mentioned, or buying special objects in particular places so that the person for whom the magic is intended may be affected physically or mentally. That is, if he is reported lost, he can be located by it, or he can be put to sleep or be made unconscious. It can also be used for creating love or discord between two people, like husband and wife. In Tafsir al-Mizan, he says very interesting points are mentioned under explanation of the 104th verse of Surah Baqarah. And he says, here we will present some of these from Allama Tabatabai Tafsir al-Mizan, and we'll go through some of them, inshallah. He says, it's common knowledge that many unusual events do take place which are beyond the established natural system. It's difficult to find someone who has not seen or heard about some abnormal or seemingly supernatural event. But on close scrutiny, it turns out that most of them are not enigmatic and mysterious at all. They are the results of normal and natural causes, like intensive practice and training, for example, eating poison, lifting heavy loads, walking or dancing on a tight rope. Someone could, microdose themselves with the poison over time. They get used to these things, and then they say that they have some supernatural ability, but it's through something they have practiced. Some are based on natural causes that are not known to the general public. For example, a man walks into flaming fire without coming to any harm. He says maybe he is applying some chemicals like talc to his body. Or he sends a sheet of blank paper and the addressee understands the message it contains. Maybe he's writing it in invisible ink that becomes visible if heated by fire or with some chemicals. But the general public doesn't see it. Only the person who receives it sees it. A third set depends on this, the sleight of the hand, like juggling, he says, or these type of things. And all of these seemingly abnormal feats actually emanate from normal causes, although the causes are unknown to the common layperson, and that they may be beyond his ability. They're like tricks of the eye or tricks of the hand or these type of things. He said, yet there are other strange happenings that cannot be attributed to any normal physical cause. For example, giving information of the unseen, and particularly fortune-telling events, foretelling future events, the charms for love and hate, the harmful or beneficial spells affecting man's fertility, hypnotism, mesmerism, spiritualism, telekinesis, and so on. It is known that such events do take place from time to time, and we have seen some demonstrations ourselves, he says, and similar reports were brought to us by reliable sources. At present, there are many people in India, Iran, and Western countries who demonstrate such extraordinary feats, and their authenticity is beyond any doubt. He says it appears from close investigation that their methods, that these feats spring from the willpower of the doer and from his unshakable self-confidence. The willpower arises from the special knowledge which they have mastered. Sometimes the will acts independently, and sometimes it needs some boosting. For example, writing a certain charm with a certain ink in a certain place at a certain time for the amulets of love and hate. So it requires certain conditions and certain things. Where they learn these things from, I have no idea. He says, or fixing a mirror before a certain child in the seances, or chanting a certain incantation a certain number of times, and so on and so forth. When the conditions are fulfilled, the will is strengthened to bring the desired effect into being. We also have some of these things within Islam. It says recite this phrase such and such many times to get the desired effect of this. It's not magic, but is a method that is used to get the desired result. Or we have certain type of hurdles that are written in a certain phase of the moon and certain time and certain thing, and they inscribe these things in the amulet or in the rings. We can see these things that are written. They look like signs and symbols and these things. So they come from us from reliable sources. He says, when the knowledge becomes one with the knower, it influences his senses to such an extent that he sees the end product, that is, the desired effect, with his eyes. You may verify this statement yourself, he says. Just tell yourself that a certain person is present before you and that you are looking at him. And put your imagination to work to bring this form before your eyes. This should be raised to such a high level of certainty that you become oblivious of all other thoughts and ideas, and it will be as if you will actually see him standing before you like you imagined. Many ancient doctors, acting on this principle, restored to health their incurable patients simply by creating in them the confidence that they would get their health back soon. He says, taking this principle a step further, if someone's willpower is extraordinarily strong, it might influence the psyche of another individual and create the desired impression on him also. That impression might or might not depend on fulfillment of certain other conditions that were mentioned earlier. So he says we don't have time to get into it, but from the above, he says we can deduce three principles. Inshallah, we'll go over those in the next week's class. But we see that they are playing on the emotions here. Maybe someone is wants to see their loved one, and they have the image in their mind, and then the person starts describing very vividly the image to them in order to bring back those memories, and then the willpower is so strong in that person, and it affects the emotions of the other one so much that they see it and they imagine it, but it is as if they see it right in front of them, that they see the person that they are trying to want to talk to or want to see, and they speak to them, but they are actually not speaking to them. It's something that the other person has done to their imagination, for example. And so this is one of those things, that ways that he explained this. So very complicated subject, but inshallah we'll tackle some more of these next week, inshallah. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allah.